Hi, I'm Avery,
Hi, and I'm Em.
and you're listening to Queer Therapists Talk Wayward.
This is a watch along podcast for Netflix's 2025 Wayward, starring Mae Martin and Toni Collette.
Each episode covers an episode of this incredible limited series and looks at the story, characters, and larger themes from our own queer and trans perspectives. As therapists, we look at the show from a trans-inclusive, feminist, and decolonial psychological lens.
And we're going to cover the cult aspect and the teen rehabilitation complex, group dynamics, archetypal representation, and so much more. And we are going to ask the big questions like, what's up with all that brie?
And we will have expert guests to dive into topics more deeply. Today we'll start with episode 1, Tall Pines. Before we go into this episode, Em, why don't you give us a little more about the production details?
Yeah, so just a little bit about the production details for Tall Pines. It was released September 25th, 2025. And I don't know if y'all were like had it on your calendars, but I was like waiting for that day to come. And I was so excited. So this episode was written by Mae Martin and directed by Eurus Lynn, who also directed shows like Doctor Who and Heartstopper. OMG, one of the best personal faves. Mae has a great quote in a Screen Rant article that we can link in the show notes. And they say that I've been thinking about making Wayward since I was a teenager. My best friend when I was 16, she was a stoner, not in need of any radical intervention, and she was sent to a troubled teen institute. She was gone for 2 years and ended up escaping and hitchhiking. The stories that she had about her time there were so crazy. I've always been interested in that industry. So that's like a lot of where it's generating for Mae. So that's the kind of context for which we find ourselves in Wayward.
Today, also, I'll name that we're going to be having a guest speaker, Dr. Zoe Barnow, who has done some therapeutic work with teens and in adolescent kind of rehabilitation type of juvenile detention. And I think, yeah, to talk a little bit more about myself and my interest in the episode and doing the podcast, I think one of the things that really inspired me to want to do this podcast and to want to do it with you is just finding such a kind of overlap in the kinds of media that I know we both like here, with the level of queerness and the level of creepiness both being really high.
It's perfect. Yes.
And this kind of, yeah. And I think I love TV kind of unabashedly in a time when it feels like so many people are really apologetic about loving TV. As a queer young person growing up in rural Nevada, I think television honestly saved my life. Star Trek in particular saved my life. And Twin Peaks as well, just like finding things that were artistic and beautiful and spoke to a world outside my very small town. So I just love the potential of television to tell stories because it is a longer format, but one that you can kind of like do really unique things per episode. And this reminded me of Twin Peaks, this show, quite a lot, which
Definitely.
I think of you when I think of Twin Peaks, among beloved others. And so, yeah, I really wanted to just have this opportunity to talk to you about the symbolism here, the therapy stuff in here, the group therapy stuff, as we'll talk about later, is wild. And yeah, and teens. I work with teens in my therapeutic practice, and I love teens. I love so much the meaningful struggle of adolescence, and I see it and hear about it so often problematized. And I feel like this show really condensed some of those problems, but also some of the very problematic ways that parents and adults and people and industries look at teens as a problem. That literally is said in this episode. I wrote a bunch of notes. That scene where the principal is talking to Lila about going to the camp and hands her the pamphlet that says, see who you really are and do something about it. And also during that conversation, he says something like solve the problem of adolescence. Or that's on the video
Oh my God.
of Evelyn talking about. Anyway, yeah, this idea that teenhood is a problem
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
strikes me in the heart, and I think, yeah, this is a big part of kind of like the end point of the place where our society views teenagehood as a problem is these kinds of camps and rehabilitation centers for kids who are just doing exactly what they should be doing as teenagers.
Exactly, exactly. And parents who are not equipped are able
Yeah.
to deal with it and feel like, well, we'll talk about all of that.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, I was just over the moon when you texted me and were like, hey, do you want to do like a podcast about Wayward? I'm like 1,100,000,000%. And I'll credit you. You introduced me to the Handsome Pod and really like solidified my love and appreciation for Mae Martin's art. And
Mhm.
everything that they bring is so incredible to me. And I learned so much. And to have their just like honest and like real the representation of just who they are, them being themselves is so
Yeah.
wonderful and refreshing and great. And so I was really excited about this show and I wanted to talk to somebody about it who had seen it. And like not a lot of people around me had seen it,
Huh.
which was really interesting. I was like, come on, gays, where are y'all at? Like, what's
Yeah.
happening? What's going on? And
Uh-huh.
Toni Collette, like she's kind of
Right?
like a queer icon. I'm like, where is everybody? Anyway,
Mhm.
so I was really excited to be able to talk to you about it. And it does have a total Twin Peaksy vibe. There's moments that, we can kind of like pick and fall into of just this dreamy landscape and these weird the thing about driving. There's just different moments there. And there's a lot of nostalgia in the show for me that really resonated and made me feel like, oh, I'm a millennial Gen X cusp, and this show is speaking to me. And I don't know, Avery,
Uh-huh.
I think we're kind of close. We're in age, like I'm 43, and I think I'm a couple of years away from May, if that's right. But so May and I are kind of on the same.
I'm a little older. I just turned 50. But
Oh, happy birthday! Congrats!
yeah,
50's
thanks.
awesome.
I feel like yeah, I definitely felt like a nostalgia in it, not necessarily for my young era, but some of the things that were in there, like this Weezer song that they were playing
My
right when
God,
they first came in, was
say it
one
ain't
of my
so.
faves. Say it ain't
Hmm.
so, which is about intergenerational patterns around alcohol, which this show
Yes.
really means to and will take on over time. Like how hard it is to fight intergenerational patterns and repetition,
Yes.
and the links that people go to in the show to try to fight intergenerational patterns, creating something wholly nefarious that's, maybe not, maybe different, but not better than repeating your intergenerational patterns with your family.
Yes. So even having a song like that, which you could just be like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I used to watch that music video or I used to sing along to that, but
Uh-huh.
then having these like deeper, thoughtful, considered
Yeah.
meanings as to the placement of it. I mean, I just feel like
Yeah.
everything in the show is very, very well considered. It's like very well written and very well put together. So I think
Hmm.
that's what what is important to me about it. And then of course, just to see any kind of queer representation, queer trans representation that
Hmm.
is not just like a tragedy that's waiting to happen where I mean there's tragedy that's waiting to happen in the show but it's not about that.
Not about the
Like
queerness, right?
it's not about
Yeah.
it might be like informed by the experience of that but it's not about that solely and that is so refreshing to me and that the humor there. So that's what excites me. And I also just want to exclamation point what you said earlier about TV and for me, movies and like movie sequels being such an important part of my childhood, how I related to the world, the comfort, the familiarity, watching things again and again and again and again. I mean, that's me.
Yeah.
And I'd love to do that to engage with things and see things that I've even if I've watched it 100 times, I've never noticed before. That happens for me a lot with my favorite TV show, Twin Peaks. Every time I watch it, and I've been watching it for years and years and years, I see something or I notice something or I engage with something that was is totally new to me.
Hmm.
That's art. That's incredible
Yeah.
art, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, the truth about TV and movies is it just is, as a society, more or less where we put our money into art.
Hmm.
And, there are other little pockets where other visual arts or literary arts are respected and, paid some amount of money at some echelon. But for the most part, we pour millions and millions and billions of dollars into visual video entertainment.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, many great artists have moved in that direction because that's where you can thrive and really realize a vision as an artist these days and get paid for it.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it has become an incredible art form.
Yeah.
And in things like this, like Twin Peaks, I feel like Wayward is one of those shows where there's so many layers of meaning
Hmm.
that I do anticipate rewatching it over and over again and seeing more and thinking more deeply and kind of yeah, so impressive. Like, really, just want to say again, like, really so impressive on the part of Mae Martin to come up with this, to create it, to act in it, to get it out there. Yeah, very impressed by this show.
Yeah.
Was so
Same.
excited about it.
Me too.
Um,
And I'll just say in terms of naming kind of a bit more who we are and contextualizing that
mhm,
I identify as a Virgo,
mhm,
and queer and genderqueer therapist in California and sometimes spending time in Vermont, which is funny because that's where
mhm.
Tall Pines
Yeah,
is in Vermont. And I'm like, no,
yes.
don't paint Vermont in that light.
Mhm,
We have so many more things than that, I promise you.
mhm,
And that, just naming my positionality as a white, able-bodied, college-educated, neurotypical person who brings all of those kind of identities and experiences in the world and more things that, might come up into this conversation and analysis and yeah, like the way in which I relate to the show, that's all there. And so just wanted to really name that and say who we are in case you don't know who we are.
mhm. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, to claim that for myself, I am also a white genderqueer queer therapist, and I am mostly able-bodied and mostly neurotypical, but I think there are some really soft edges around those things as I get older. The ability is different. My mobility is becoming different, and things about my ability are really changing right now. Yeah, neurospicy is a term that I have heard lately that I
Yeah, I
really
like
like in
that.
terms of like neurotypicality. I often wonder if I had kind of like grown up in this era, how different I might have been, and I think maybe would have been diagnosed autistic as a kid if I were around these days, and the bigger spectrum had kind of been opened up. But I don't know. I've never pursued diagnosis,
Hmm.
but I think neurospicy is a word I can claim without too much diagnosis. Yeah, I think genderqueer, and I think for the sake of looking at this show, I want to name in particular that I am genderqueer. I think physically in a way that is similar to Mae Martin's. So
Mm.
that feels really alive for me as I see the representation. I've had top surgery and been on hormones, and a lot of the things that are here in terms of the representation for Mae in the show feel like representation that I'm stepping into in my own life over the last few years, having had top surgery relatively recently, and kind of yeah, moving through the world in a way that's more kind of like out as a genderqueer than I have in previous decades, going about in Guerneville, in swim trunks without a shirt,
Hmm.
having to like live in this world where that's a thing that people haven't seen before. So it feels really wild and incredible to have that kind
Yes.
of like literally shirtless trans representation on a TV show. But yeah, so that's a little bit about my kind of like identity investment in the show. And yeah, in terms
Makes
of our
much sense.
positionalities, also it feels important to me to name that we're both white and talking about this show in which there's such a prominent Asian character
Yeah.
that the character of Abby is so central to the show, and as you said earlier, central to kind of why Mae wanted to do this show is because of
Hmm.
this friend Abby that they had who went through, or I don't know if their literal friend was named Abby, but the character Abby
Hmm.
is the one who we're kind of centering in the show. So hopefully we'll have guests to speak to that part of Abby's identity as well,
Yeah,
because
makes
that
me.
feels really salient in the
Hmm.
whole arc of Abby. And
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Avery. I really appreciate that a lot. Yeah, it's good to do that, and then just to say finally on this piece that Avery and I know each other.
Mhm.
We both we're both professors of psychology, counseling psychology, and also we like to kiki and we have a great relationship. And I think that we with differences, but we also share a lot of, I think, psychological modality, kind of therapeutic modality, ways of connecting and relating with our clients. And so I think that's a really nice overlap that we bring in together in addition to all of the other identities that we bring.
Yeah, really lucky to work with you and so many other incredible people.
My goodness.
CIS, what a community. So, this episode, let's talk a little bit about some themes that we want to name for the episode.
Mhm.
And then we'll bring in our guest star
Yeah.
and talk with her about some of those things. What do you want to name from this first episode that stands out to you?
Oh my goodness. I mean, what doesn't? Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, some of the things that are very exciting to me are the kind of girlfriends relationship with Abby and Layla, and
Yeah.
setting that up from the beginning is fun. Also, the mother wound. So, like, there's so much here about moms and motherhood and complicated relationships to that. And psychologically speaking, that's a dissertation, but I'd like to kind of
Or five.
play with that a little bit together.
Mhm.
And then the other thing, I mean, if I could just say one more, is that I really am fascinated with the brie. Like I wasn't just saying that at the beginning of
Yeah,
the app,
no,
but I really love the brie. I think there's so many layers of meaning within the brie. And so I'd love to just bring that in. How about you? What are some
I
of your
love
like
it. I
fun
love it.
topics?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier already, the whole idea of problematizing adolescence and like
Hmm.
the teen, the bad teen dilemma, and what it is to be a teenager. And I mean, like I said, I work with teens in my practice, and it's such a hard time. It's such a hard time, but the teen is not the problem, you
Right,
know?
of
Like,
course.
and
Yeah.
it ends up being that, everything gets put on the teen that the teen is trying to cope with.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, all that would love to talk about, and the mother wound for real, and doors and frogs,
Doors and
doors and
frogs.
frogs. Yeah, frogs. Interesting. Want to unpack the symbolism of frogs.
Hmm.
I have a little bit too on there's the symbolism of the dog in here in one of the scenes that I really liked. The dog gets agitated and kind of draws them out to look, and that's how when they find the basement with
Mm-hmm.
the door painted on the wall and the symbol of the dog and the archetype of the dog. Um,
Mm.
and then just like yeah,
Love
curious to
that.
just associate on frogs and
Yeah.
brie
Yeah.
a, a bunch.
Dogs and frogs and brie. That's
Dogs and
so
frogs and
okay.
brie.
Yeah, it sounds so fun.
And mother wounds.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Mother
for sure.
wounds.
That sounds great.
Just the light topic of
A
mother
little
wounds. Like, no big
and
deal.
no NBD.
One thing I
Mhm.
didn't say at the beginning, which I think is an important part of who I am and what I bring to these conversations, is that I deeply value incorporating pop culture into my clinical practice and how I think
Cool.
about healing and the healing journey and
Uh-huh.
psyche and spirit. And so,
Huh.
when a client says to me, "Oh, I spent the weekend, I didn't do much, I watched a show, da 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 da,"
Yeah.
I'll be like, "What show did you watch?"
Yeah,
Oh, well, I
totally.
watched da da da. Oh, cool. Tell me about what your relationship is to that show. I mean, and if they don't want to talk about it, of course, like we go to other places.
Mhm.
But if oftentimes they're like surprised that I'm interested at first, if they
Yeah.
don't know me, and then they're like, "Oh, you mean I get to have this relationship to like see myself reflected back in these other characters?" And
Yeah.
it's like the
Mm,
it really can go to many places and open up so much, and I love it. And
totally.
so I think about that as I think about the importance of what we were talking about earlier around TV and movies and pop culture in our childhoods, and the importance of
Mhm.
that, and how that's also true for clients, and it's true for a lot of us now. I know there are
Yeah.
people who don't consume TV, movies, etc., and I
Yeah.
respect that, but I feel like it's
Totally.
such an important part of storytelling, meaning making, mirroring,
Mhm.
reflection back, all
Mhm.
of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can be so sophisticated and it can be so important to people. And there really is this tendency for people to feel guilt about it, to feel
Yeah.
like it's bad or it's naughty or it's wasting their time, like you said, like, oh, I didn't do anything. I just watched TV all weekend. There's such a feeling of like, oh, like I'm a lazy piece of shit that
Hmm.
goes along with that. That's so
Hmm.
unnecessary and it's so sad. It's like you're doing some, you're taking care, you're taking care of yourself.
Yes,
Your psyche is doing stuff there, and
totally.
it can be foreclosed by the guilt in a way that I think, yeah, I have worked with people therapeutically to try to break that down, to be
Hmm.
like, can we talk about it? Can we make use of it? Like this is something you're making use of. So let's deepen that use that you're already making of this thing.
Yes.
Totally. I try to do that with folks
Oh,
too. And
good.
the people who really watch the same things I watch, it can be, such an incredible shared language. I have one client who I work with really regularly who I mean, I have a few clients who watch Star Trek,
Mm,
and it's
it's fun.
it's a language I speak fluently, and we can
Mm,
have really complex conversations about things that they're experiencing through the language of these characters, and
hmm.
yeah, it's so valuable as a shared landscape to talk about feelings, to it does that thing of externalization.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah, that's really cool. I do that stuff too. I've definitely wanted to do. I've been so inspired by your Twin Peaks elective. I've definitely wanted to do a Star Trek version of that
Oh
for
my
sure.
gosh, everyone would take that class. I
It
mean,
would.
I
There's
mean,
so much. It
what?
could be like really like
Oh,
three or four, one for each series, because I mean, each series is so rich in what it brings. Both social justice and the transpersonal are,
hmm.
like both of our pillows are woven through Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's crazy. The other thing I try to work with clients on that I work with myself on is just the nervous system regulation of comfort watching.
Uh-huh.
So old Star Trek will still do that for me. It will still calm my nervous system right down.
Oh, really? Even
Yeah,
after, yeah, because it just goes right back in. It's like a
yeah,
sense memory
yeah,
going
exactly.
on. Hi,
It's our,
Zoe.
it's our guest. Hi, Zoe.
Hello.
Hi. I'll do a wee bit of a formal introduction for you. So we invited to talk about the first episode, Dr. Zoe Barnow. Zoe is a psychotherapist in private practice who also does supervision. Zoe, like me, works with teens in her private practice, but also has worked with teens in an institutional setting and done, more, I think, than I have in community mental health in general, working with teens and families. So great to have you here today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming.
What were some of your highlights?
I found this show immediately compelling and it kind of captured my energy right away. Um, it's eeriness, it's clear that we're entering into the world of these young people who are pretty, I don't know, pretty typical in many ways, but then also we start to see that there's some underbelly or there's some kind of darkness and suffering that they each are confronting in their own unique ways. And I'm certainly drawn in by that. So I the two teens kind of grabbed me right away. Mae Martin, I mean, I love Mae Martin, so that was a big part of why I mean, I had this show release on my calendar for weeks or months before knowing that this was coming out.
Same, same. I was like, let's go, come on.
Yeah. And Toni Collette. Oh my God, I have a
Hmm.
huge, giant crush on Toni Collette, and I think she's an incredible actress. So I was really looking forward to seeing their collaboration. Yeah, and she delivers. They both deliver. Mae delivers as well. They are really, yeah, really on their game. It's high quality television and storytelling. And I think the other thing, just most generally, is there's so many symbols that just seem to be dropped in all throughout, and right away my mind is kind of analyzing and getting curious and wondering, and where are we headed, and what does this all mean, and how's it going to tie together, what's it going to build up to. Yeah, I mean, I think that idea about the adolescence as a problem, it is really immediately brings up a lot of questions and curiosity for me. And certainly we do see some of the, I don't know if I even want to say problematic aspects of adolescence. I don't think that is quite right, but some of the, the territory that teens get into, which can be tricky, and it can be self-destructive, and it can be other destructive, and there can be um, huge challenges, of course, in that time. But the way that it is so explicitly problematized in this show, well, not in the show, but by the, sort of this institution of sending teens away, and, kind of looking down on Lila so much, it is as a troublemaker, as someone who's trying to bring her friend down. Um, it's it's painful. I mean, it's painful to see that part, I think, and to to see them clearly struggling and in pain in different ways, and very obviously not getting the attention or care or empathy or even curiosity. There's no curiosity about their experiences. It's all just, something's wrong, you need to be different, we need to correct this. And yeah, I think, it does make me think about, certainly working with a lot of teens and families over the years. I do have compassion for the kind of limits and edges that parents can get to in terms of feeling beyond their capacity to know how to care for teens, or their young ones as they move through that really complex age stage. And also, it's disheartening and quite disappointing to see how inadequately these parents are, in particular, are, dealing with their very normative teen experiences, really, in many ways. Um, so those are some things. How about you, Em? What were you thinking about the adolescence piece in particular?
Yeah. I mean, everything you said really resonates. I think, with Lila, she's her family is in such deep grief that they're not dealing with. I mean, her mom is completely dissociated, and unavailable. And so, and then she's turning to like doing drugs and, doing nefarious shit, which I did when I was her age. I mean, what drugs didn't I do when I was that age? But there's a sense though of something deeper going on there that she needs help and support with, and we don't get the sense that she's getting that at all. And the same, Abby's dressing like a hippie, and that's bad. I mean, who I dress like a anyway, but it's with her family system, I think probably additionally like the cultural pressures of like saving face and having things look good to the outside. Like she doesn't look good to the outside. She doesn't look good to that white family who's come into that house eating their brie. Can't stop talking
Mm-hmm.
about the brie. But she doesn't fit into that living room. So has to go change. She has to go be something different. Literally change and then be something different. And the other thing that strikes me about their relationship is I love how it's written because it's so real. I had so many, like, especially one girl in particular, Randy Teese. Oh my God, I just pulled a Mae Martin and said her full name, like Mae does on Handsome. You know how Mae is just like so and so, so and so. And they're like, you're saying her full name. Anyway, I just did that. But with Randy Teese, I mean, Randy was like the bad girl who would do shit like that, would always have like weed and coke at her house. And I was 13 and I was like in love with her. So of course I did, I was following her. I did this kind of like, I had this unrequited desire for her energy to be the bad girl. But this idea of like following around somebody who you're not supposed to be in love with and you're not supposed to be doing the things you're doing with that person is so compelling and provocative. And how many mix CDs did we make and give to each other? Please forget
Mhm.
about it. You have to write the songs on the thing, and it has to be in the perfect handwriting, and you have to put little hearts around it. And if you don't do that, you're not making a mix CD appropriately. So I'd love to hear any thoughts also that you want to add in about mix CD. But yeah, this idea that it's the kids that are the problem.
Mhm.
The kids, the kids are a manifestation of whatever it is that's going on in the family system, and it's easy to point to them to not take responsibility and accountability for your part. So, I mean, this is all in that world. Yeah. Yeah. How about for you, Avery? What are you thinking?
Well, what you just said made me think about frogs because, they're so sensitive. And that's one of the things that frogs, kind of scientifically are kind of harbingers, or like, I forget what the term is, but their skin is so sensitive that we can anticipate effects of things like climate change for us based on, what's going on with frogs because their skin is so thin. And that's, I think true of frogs also is that I think about in terms of this show that they have a particularly awkward teenage phase because they go from like this tadpole to this frog. They have a really distinct kind of developmental arc. And the middle phase is extremely awkward and strange looking, which I think for humans too, we have a very awkward teen time. It's hard, it's rough. And maybe in similar ways, we can think socially of how we go from like a really young like child, and people, I think, as much as you have the privilege to do so economically and socially, some children have a kind of innocent childhood. You can preserve that to a certain extent if you have enough privilege. I mean, with social media and media in general, it's getting harder and harder, but I think of the problem of teenness and adolescence in a couple of ways. One is just simply that like that's when human beings are really taking in the world around them in a new way for the first time, seeing it for what it is, seeing climate change, seeing social structures, seeing, the difficulties that they have socially in their peer groups, and also seeing the layers of society and trying to come to terms for the first time with like, okay, I'm going to have to live in this world. Like, what does that actually look like from a non-childlike perspective? How am I going to survive, make money, build a life in this particular world? And that is so much to take in right now. And so teens that I work with now, I just see so many different ways of coping with that, may or may not appear healthy, but that's a hell of a learning curve to go from like some kind of childhood to, okay, I can understand the world and function in it. Like that's so much to learn and take in and understand right now. And so much of it is toxic and causes suffering. And so what I appreciated about what you said, Zoe, so much was just that there is this way that teens are suffering, and that like the characters that we see, Abby and is it Layla? Layla?
I think
Give
it's
me
Lila.
Lila. uh, the way that they're both suffering so much and why is so apparent, but yet they're being problematized for their suffering, where it goes from like, let's look at the suffering that's happening in the family dynamic, let's look at the suffering in society. This teenager is just trying to like cope with these things, and that's really hard. But then somehow that gets formulated back into like this teenager is a problem somehow because they're not coping good enough. Even though it's a really big ask for teens these days to cope with whatever's going on in their family system and the world, and try to figure out how to have an entry point into this world that doesn't feel, I don't know, like desperation and shutdown. That's tough. But teens are asked to do all that and go through these wild school schedules with a ton of homework and do all that, and
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. So the whole thing of adolescence is, I think, not only generally hard, and the other way I think about it is in terms of just the neuroscience of teens. I'll put in a plug for Daniel Siegel's book Brainstorm, which talks about the neuropsychology of the teenage brain. It needs risk, it needs its peers, and it needs to resist the parents. Those are kind of the big developmental tasks of the teen years, and finding ways for teens to be able to take risks that are, seem safe-ish and to resist the parents in ways that feel, tolerable to the whole system is also a big ask, just for the teen brain to do what it's supposed to do and the teen social being to do what it's supposed to do. And so many parents don't understand that resistance is part of the job of a teenager. Like that is their literal developmental job, is to push back on you. It's not because they hate you. It's not because they're bad. It's just literally what they have to do to become an individual person in the world. So that's so, I feel so, yeah, such a part of my work with teens to work with parents on that, on like how to tolerate that and understand it as part of the job, not a problem.
I think that's so real. And I also think, or as I'm thinking as I'm hearing each of you, it could be really easy to kind of vilify the parents as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
do, while I do have many critiques of Abby's parents and Lila's mother, you brought in, they're really suffering, especially Lila's mother. I mean, she is drowning in grief and has no, I mean, she's, yeah, practically not there. She practically doesn't exist. She's non-responsive when Lila comes home from school. I mean, it's intense how checked out and how numbed out she is. Of course, that's what Lila's turning to also, right? That's obviously in the family system. That's how they know how to manage. But so while I could certainly critique and analyze, and I wish these parents had a lot more education, a lot more support themselves, I think part of what that points to for me too is the larger systemic gap, like this societal gap, that this family where this young girl dies tragically, they're not being held. The community has not gathered around and held them, or figured out how to show up and support the mom to keep it together enough to be able to keep being a mother. And the daughter, certainly, I don't know, it sounds like she gets sent to some grief therapist whose office smells bad. And so she's like, why would I keep going to this? And also clearly just didn't feel understood or helped in any meaningful way. So why would you keep doing that? But it just, I think, really points to me to how do we, as a larger community, as a society, at least here in California, and I think probably we could say in many parts of the United States, there just aren't enough cultural and systemic safety nets for these kinds of real huge tragedies, like the death of a young, of a teenager, but also just sort of everyday difficulties of, in Abby's family, we don't know about the kind of acculturation history or what generation this family is in the United States, but cultural complexity and dynamics. There's obviously this, like you said, needing to appear a particular way, present as very well off and educated and having things together and on a particular trajectory. But, they're also just doing their best and trying to figure out how to kind of exist and connect. So, yeah, it seems like we have this sort of extreme uh, other thing where we then send our young people away and they get dealt with elsewhere. And then, of course, yeah, we see later in the show in some pretty horrifying ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that back in, Zoe, that part about, what's going on with the parents and what's going on systemically that is impacting the parents and how they're coming to this moment of, wanting to send their kid away somewhere. What does it take to get to that level? And I think that, there's a lot of complex factors. So I really appreciate you just bringing that back in again. Again, not to excuse anything, but just to create the whole context, the greater context of how this might be happening and why. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about the splits too in Abby's family between her and her sister. Like there's so much splitting that's putting on there of like the sister is good and she is bad. And then, okay, the bad thing has to be gone so that only the good thing can emerge. And why? What about saving face maybe culturally, but also like as a survival strategy? Like how do they survive in this community?
I mean, that it may be an entryway into talking about the mother wound. I think I try to think about this, and certainly it comes up like when I'm teaching human dynamics in particular. I feel like often we'll be talking in a way that is kind of othering and condemning of mothers and primary caregivers in general, but particularly I think mothers because of that, the misogyny and the history of it all. I think mothers do get blamed in the literature of psychotherapy kind of consistently and
Totally.
in a way that's not it's not really fair if we hold the mother in context of society or we any person who's a primary caregiver, certainly a single primary caregiver, the
Hmm.
limitations there and the lack of supports are so real, and of course everything that would be ideal from a parent is not possible for anybody under any circumstances, whatever ideals we write about in these lovely psychotherapy articles where we get to envision what could be, mostly doesn't represent anybody's real ability to parent. So I try to hold that in line with the enormity of our mother wounds, and just how we feel so acutely the limitations of our primary caregiver. Like they become a part of us. Those limitations, whatever limitations were there
Hmm.
in the primary caregiver, kind of carve out places in us and live in us forever. So it's intense what we hold from our mothers. It's so intense, so painful, and of course they're just contextualized as human beings in this world suffering misogyny and late capitalism and
Hmm.
etc.
Hmm.
um, and perhaps depending on positionality also suffering from racism and a variety of things. So just to say, as we talk about the mother wounds, yes, parents are people, and this world is generally challenging for people, and any person raising kids is
Hmm.
is usually juggling a number of impossible tasks.
Oh yeah, it's not about blaming the
Uh,
mother. Like this isn't what
mhm,
we're totally, absolutely, this isn't what we're doing, but just to say that the relationships with mothers in this
mhm.
show is incredibly complicated, and I love that. I
Yeah.
love how the resistance, I was thinking about like this idea of like resisting the mother, like resisting the part of yourself for Laura that is going to be a mother. I mean, she
Mhm,
literally in this rewatch, when they do the sonogram picture on the
Mhm.
refrigerator, and she's like stares at it blankly, and then she says how much of an alien it looks. And at first
mhm,
watch, I was like, yeah, it does. Of course, sonogram pictures are weird. Of course, it looks like an alien. But then on this watch,
mhm.
she actually is looking at it like it's an alien, like it's
Yeah.
something that is not part of her, that is this
Yeah.
foreign thing that
Mhm,
doesn't exist within her understanding or her somatic, spiritual, psychic world almost
uh-huh.
at all. There is such a disconnect. She's trying to like really be like, huh, there's this foreign being in my body, which I understand a lot of like mothers feel, but this feels really different to me. I
Mhm,
wondered if y'all had that same vibe check
mhm,
read on
mhm,
this.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That moment stood out to me in a whole different way the second time
Hmm.
through. I mean, it's
Hmm.
hard, I think we're mostly sticking to this first episode, but of course we've seen the whole show, so it
Right.
really brings a whole other context in,
Hmm.
and we know later on more information about how incredibly foreign and disconnected she is from this pregnancy and from the fetus growing inside of her. So
Hmm.
yes, that moment I think really stands out in a different way. There's such a disconnect and such an inability or kind of inaccessibility to feeling into, I think, kind of a maternal instinct on some level.
Hmm.
And it's interesting to think about Evelyn as her mother figure, right? And then of course she has a biological mother as well, but there's confusing information.
Hmm.
We don't totally know actually what the history or story there is, but Evelyn becomes this sort of almost all consuming, overbearing, very dominating figure in her life who sort of knows best and really takes a lot of control over her entire existence
Yeah.
and her everything. So that's her kind of imprint of what a mother is, and she's, yeah, I don't know. I think she on some level reveres Evelyn, but then is also resisting her version in her own way. So maybe that leaves her feeling quite lost as to how to orient herself or how to locate herself. What would her particular or unique version of being a mother be.
Yeah, and that Toni Collette is the really the model of mothering that Laura had. And so in order to be that mother, she has to eviscerate Toni Collette in order to be the mother that she was modeled to become, which works. And I know we're jumping ahead, but works if you resist motherhood and don't think of your baby as something that is you, that it's the baby as the collective baby. It made me think about also this movie Mother. Have y'all seen that with J Law? It came out a while back.
No, I was super curious about it.
It's
Is
so
that Lars von Trier,
Yeah, I
right?
think so. Yeah. Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
interesting and has some similar themes around this weird relationship with
Alien baby.
alien baby ideas, not an actual alien, but like feeling alien with your baby and then having the collective try to move it and take it. And do you want that or do you not want that? I also had this like iconography, and tell me if y'all had this too, of like that Laura has the power in the community because she's the only one who can give birth. Like no one else is giving birth. There's no kids coming in. So she has all the power. And it's almost like because we don't know how this baby came to be, I don't think. Like I don't think the storyline is there of like how they decided that or what happened or and so it's almost like this like Virgin Mary or something like that she just like has this baby coming into her. I had that iconography and she like
Huh?
kind of has this energy of and I think a lot of people who are that pregnant also have this kind of they're accessing spiritual realms that we can't because they're so in that space. But she has this air of like divinity about her or something like someone got her price somehow this baby came into her and now she's like some like a prophet or something. I don't know,
Yeah.
it just struck me about that.
That's fascinating. I mean, I think in terms of like queer representation, it's interesting because we joke and I know other queer couples who've been like trying to have babies joke about like immaculate conception. It's a legit queer joke. Like
Oh, really? That's so funny. I didn't know that.
well, just I feel like it's something that you think about eventually when you're like, God, there's like we're paying for sperm and we're doing all these things and like maybe we'll just have like a miracle conception of some kind. Is an easy fantasy to have. And so it's interesting, they don't go into any of those details that one might about a queer pregnancy of like who the sperm donor is or did they do that or what happened. It really is this kind of like immaculate conception in terms of the show and what we know about it. And it's interesting. I feel like they leave a lot of really interesting blanks like that, and especially around mothers. Like we do have some sketchy, weird images and impressions of what Laura's parents may have been like, but Mae's or Alex's in the show, we really have none. They don't say anything about Alex's parents whatsoever, even though Alex is clearly carrying some baggage of their own. There's kind of very little said about mother at all. Maybe I think a little bit about father as having been an angry person, but about mother, nothing. It's like she doesn't exist. Which is interesting to think about in terms of the generation here. Like you were talking about earlier, this kind of like late millennial generation, I think was maybe a generation that was raised by the busiest mothers that had been in a while. Like
Yes.
those mothers were the most likely to have been experienced as absentee, probably generationally. There was more of that, the kind of experience of an absentee mother or an emotionally absent mother. So I think that that's something that you can kind of feel in its absence for both Laura and Mae.
Yeah.
Evelyn's a substitute mother, and Mae's mother is not.
Yeah, that's so interesting to think too about. I'm just kind of a new lens came on because I do a lot of work with the perinatal period. So folks who are kind of trying to get pregnant, are pregnant, or in the postpartum period. And just thinking about Laura as in many ways kind of experiencing already perinatal depression and or dissociation in terms of what we're talking about, the kind of trouble connecting with this symbolic baby is a way that I might think about it. Um, and knowing that on some level we don't know exactly what's what, but that for sure what happened is there was something very traumatic between her and her parents, and we don't know quite in which direction or if it was all directions or how much of it was sort of implanted into her memory or actual memory, but something terrible happened.
Yeah.
um, and just thinking about, and then also the way it's represented in the show, it's blurry, it's fragmented, it's unclear. There are many different versions of this traumatic happening, as often is the case with traumatic material and memory, right? Like it does become fragmented in our bodies, in our minds. It shows up in dreams. Think parts can get dissociated or sort of cut, split off. And so to then think about how that's already showing up in the pregnancy is just really, that feels very real. That just feels very true to what I witness and experience a lot, these kinds of historical and imprints and transmissions from generation to generation that just get replicated. I mean, even in this sort of becoming the collective or the community baby, Laura was sort of never claimed or kind of gets claimed later, but it's just interesting to think about what repetition might be already in motion there.
Yeah.
Can I just say the chant real quick?
Yes, do it.
Are you
I was
ready
hoping
for
that you
it?
would get there. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just gonna like bring in my Toni Collette. You're lying on your back, crying out for your mother. She is standing, facing the wall. She has her back to you. A bell rings. Your mother turns to face you. She is silent, but her mouth is wide open. In her mouth is a door. Did I do it?
Totally.
Did you like see Toni Collette in your mind's eye when I was doing that? I was
I felt creeped out within the first two sentences. I was like,
and what's interesting about that is in her mouth is a door. The way she says it, it does kind of tick up at the end, almost as if there's more to come, but there's never more to come. It doesn't go further than that in the show. Yeah. So it's kind of like, where are we going? What doors are opening? I mean, and maybe that's a great segue to talk about any thoughts around doors, because that certainly came up.
Well, it's so interesting. The door here is a door that goes nowhere, like, but somewhere. There's this idea that the door opens and you go through it for the leap, but it is like a psychedelic trip, and there are drugs involved, right? When they do, we'll talk about the leap more later, but like it is a psychedelic thing, like where you present somebody with something that appears to be blank for their psyche to fill in, like what is on the other side of that door. But yeah, the door is painted onto a wall in both cases, where this door appears in the show. It's actually a door that can't be opened, that goes nowhere in reality, but I think is meant to open some kind of psychic door that goes somewhere. But yeah, I mean, to talk about the mother wound, here it is. You're prone and helpless, crying out, and she's standing, staring at the wall with her back to you. The rejection, the lack of interest, the helplessness, all of that.
Non-responsive.
Yeah, it's a non-responsive mother who is rejecting.
But also in this little ditty, the thing that gets repeated over and over. Yes, the door is painted on the wall in the home, but in this little bit, the door is in her mouth. So actually, that you're going inside of the mother. The mother is consuming. I don't know. I don't quite think I quite registered it that way until you just read it there.
Well, it was my dramatic interpretation that really helped everything change for you. So I understand that.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, the mother is consuming. She's quiet, but you can come into my mouth. But in the mouth is a door, and so Avery, to your question, like, where does that door go? Does it just pop back? So you're stuck in that loop of wanting to come into mother, coming in, and then getting pushed back out again, because you can't actually leave. You don't actually go anywhere. The doors don't open.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, this reminds me very much of like narcissistic injury, and the narcissistic injury in the mother wound of like a mother that feels disconnected or rejecting, truly, like she would rather stare at the wall than look at you until she's ready to consume you. So there's such pain in this of like, I'm bad, which is really what, again, not to be too far ahead, but it's so hard to do. I think what Evelyn really tries to cultivate in folks to control them is a sense of badness, that they're bad, that they did something bad and they're bad, and she's the only one who will love them, which is so much what cult leaders do, but also, what happens in a narcissistic injury? You end up feeling bad. You feel like something is intrinsically bad and dark and terrible in you. And this I would say is a big part of the mother wound for a lot of people, is some deep sense of badness and rejectability and unlovability. So you end up, I feel like, often in a kind of psychic loop, always relating with that inner mother. In this kind of narcissistic wounding, I have a couple lines that come strongly to mind where you're just kind of like always arguing with your mother in your head about whether or not you're bad. And you do that, in so many different relationships in the world. But you're really, living in this kind of insular, you're living in the mother in a way, maybe in that narcissistic relating that you're doing, always arguing with your mother in your head, of which I'm totally guilty.
100%.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I don't know how much you talked about this already, but just the doors as barriers, as boundaries, as portals, as entry points, but also as something that can be closed. But of course, the first thing that Alex says, or one of the first things upon entering the home that Evelyn has so generously gifted them, is that there is that there are no doors. There are no doors, and there's just these hinges there. Yeah, just again playing with this idea, the imagery of the door being in the mother's mouth, and so there's this consuming quality, but this boundarylessness, which of course, when you're in the womb, there is a boundarylessness. Like you are one, and then slowly you come out, you're born, and then there's this process unfolding, psychoanalytically, of kind of separating from the body and realizing that you're a separate being. Evelyn's a lot of her whole deal is that there's no limits, there's no boundaries, there's no containment, there's no except for if she chooses it to be so, right? Like she gets to lock kids into this facility and she gets to decide when people can come out or not. But otherwise, she's just kind of in their minds and in their everything. She's so in their business, or controlling, or sort of puppeteering, pulling the strings.
Yeah, it's just so much how abuse works. Like it gets inside of us, even if the person is not there. And we do it for ourselves, that interjects.
Mm-hmm.
There is no door when it comes in like that. There is no boundary. It's all permeable. It's like it just goes in and it stays with you. And it's with Laura, and it's with everybody that we see who has been subjected to Toni Collette's, oh, I'm coming over for dinner tomorrow night, or whatever the fuck. Like she
Right.
just, okay, like whatever you say, because you're in charge of the whole town. And she is. I mean, that's the thing. She actually is. Mae, it's interesting because I keep saying Mae. Alex and Laura go to the basement, and then Mae has to open the door. Well, first of all, he finds all the doors down in the basement from the house. So they're all taken down, which is just this message of like, I'm going to see you. I'm going to be here. My energy is here even when I'm not here. I'm interjected into this house even when I'm not here. And then he has to try to open the door, and then Laura leaves because she can't tolerate it. Yeah. Doors, boundaries. I didn't clock it the first time when he says there are no doors in the house. I didn't clock that. I mean, I heard it, but I didn't, it's these funny like clues, little things that are dropped along the way. And then once you see it all, you come back to it and you're like, oh my God, of course, that makes sense. They're giving us things without, yeah.
There's so much foreshadowing. That becomes really clear when you go back to watch again. I mean, you kind of have that sense the first time through, but you of course don't know what it means yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's different layers in what we've been talking about today. I'm aware, and I keep wanting to go back to what you said quite some time ago about just like the specialness of this teen girl friendship. And I think especially like, well, I don't want to limit it for anybody, but I know it's true for a lot of like queer folks and gay, bisexual folks, that having those really early tight relationships, like you were talking about, like you have to do everything a certain way. You have the hearts are on everything. Like having those really tight relationships almost feels like a kind of merger. Like there's psychic merger, right? That we're talking about, that are like in different forms throughout the show, but this community, is just all no doors, really. Like the whole community is like in a state of psychic merger. Like, and that's, that state of psychic merger is what Toni Collette has spent so much time cultivating in this community, or Evelyn, we should say. But yeah, Evelyn has really made this community where everybody has interjected her. And so not only, like you said, like she gets to decide when she releases them from her container, when they've properly interjected her and are, like completely controlled, then they can kind of be released out into this larger entity that is still one entity under her control.
Yeah.
And there's that like big state of psychic merger. The mother wound, I think, can be so much about like feeling invaded psychically if you have an intrusive or interjected mother. So I was writing down as I was taking notes about this, like something about like, do we all want psychic merger on some level? And I think there is like a toggle back and forth there for most folks in attachment of like wanting to be close and one and have that experience of like we're thinking the same things and we're breathing the same breath and then wanting to have difference and differentiation and like I am on my own. And that is so much what adolescence is about too, developmentally, is like going from states of feeling really close with the parents to states where you can really be different from the parents and not like the things that they think or say for maybe the first time. So the show plays with that in so many different ways, like how psychically porous we are to each other, whether we want to be in a state of no doors or many doors. And all of that feels like so rich in terms of just the connections between, community closeness, mother closeness, teen closeness with each other, which again is like one of the tasks of teenhood is to bond with peers. So you do, I mean, like it's so intense that merger between like teen friendships. You feel like one and the same.
And I think Abby does such an amazing, I love everything she said, by the way. I think Abby does such an amazing job of both like falling in that merger and then also pulling back out. Like she does a really, she's in her own vibe, Of course, she's upset when she leaves her on mushrooms at the school that they broke into. Kind of shit is that? That's not some good,
Stupid.
that's no, with her 26-year-old boyfriend, which I had a whole other problem. But she's still like she's on her own. She's listening to
Yeah.
her hippie, like she's got her own vibe going on. So I think she navigates that really well, which is a really nice setup for this problem of merging and converging and all of that. And then in terms of the town and the community, what you're saying, Avery, I really like because, it goes into the cult piece a little bit just to say that even when Toni Collette is not there, she has taught and trained people to police each other so that the status quo can be, maintained. So she doesn't even have to. She doesn't even have to do it. She has been doing it in a way where now it will just operate that way. And it does outside of the school, wherever they are. There, everyone is in it.
Yeah.
This is cult stuff.
Oh, I know. It's so creepy. It's interesting though, as you were just talking, I was also thinking about a very, at least to me and my queer world and community, a very kind of queer fantasy about more collective chosen family existence and community and coexisting. And so it is fascinating to think about this. It's so culty, so it has a creepy and controlling and not free quality, but there is something about becoming part of this collective and people just drop off baskets of goodies on your front porch and there is this sort of it's well intentioned, I guess, maybe as part of it. There's ideas about it that are very appealing and that I get excited about and that I dream about. And yet, yeah, this kind of psychic merger concept is also really fascinating to think about. Do we want that? Yes, part of me does. Part of me wants this collective being together, watching out for one another, really showing up in this very family-like way with our chosen people. But also, yeah, I also want privacy and limits, and I don't want people watching my every move or having so much say over how I live or don't live. So yeah, it's obviously an extreme, but it's there's something there too about kind of queer existence or even kind of being out in the country, right? Like we all moved out into the country, I think.
Yeah, go to the country. Absolutely. And in that collectivist way with our chosen family. And that's the thing without these other dynamics of surveillance and all the other stuff. But yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that in. Do we want, should we talk a little bit about trans and queer representation that we
Yes.
wanted that in this first ep?
I wanted to say though, this thing that you were talking about, Em, where like that we've been all been talking about, where kind of Evelyn implanted herself and then kind of like created this community of mutual surveillance, reminded me of Foucault's concept of the panopticon. So it really, that idea of
Oh,
like a
yeah.
prison that's built that is circular, where everybody looks at each other, and so everybody's policing each other. Like that's
Mhm.
such a thing that is built into society. It's such a,
It
just
is.
like hegemonic, anything can be built into a system in which we police. And gender, I mean, gender is certainly, I think about gender a lot when I think about the panopticon, like how everybody is trained as a child to police gender
Hmm.
and to
Hmm.
notice when anybody's gender is off of the box that it's supposed to be on and name that. And so, yeah, it's interesting to kind of bring that in here in a way that's not explicitly about gender, but I just really connected those two things, like how what she really did here, Evelyn, is create a kind of panopticon of constant surveillance of the community. And
Hmm.
also that is such a thing that people do with gender explicitly. And, as somebody who's genderqueer in the world, I just experience that in a million ways all the time. Just
Hmm.
people trying to name and police my gender has been such a thing through life. So yeah, let's talk about queer representation. There's so much of it in here, and it's so cool. When they're first coming in, and Alex, kind of just on the other side of when Alex is naming that there's no doors, there's this moment where they're looking at where the nursery is going to be and talking about it, and he just names that he feels like he could never have all this, or felt like he could never have all this. And I think so many of the trans moments in here are like pretty subtle, and I appreciate that because I think we're not trying to distance anybody, but that I think is a pretty big moment in the terms of the trans representation of just like I know that that's such an experience that so many trans and queer people have as they're building a family in particular, maybe buying a home in particular, or in this case, getting gifted a home by your cult leader, whatever, but
Whatever it is.
however you get your home, as a queer person, that moment can be huge to feel like, oh, I get to have these normal things that I thought that I was disenfranchised from completely when I was a kid, because that was just the story that I was told, is that queers don't get these things.
Or that, and I'm sorry to like take it to this level, or that like I won't live that long to get these
Yeah,
things. Like that's
real,
fucking
totally,
real. You know what I mean?
totally.
Like, yeah, or I don't deserve them, or they're not
Mhm.
for me, or I resist them, which is fair.
Yep.
But I don't, but the thing of like I don't deserve them and they're not for me is
Yeah,
like exactly, yeah, that's such a, I'm really glad you mentioned that moment. I felt the same way. Hmm.
yeah, that was an important one.
Hmm.
I have complex feelings about it because I do have, as somebody who's solidly Gen X, I have a complicated relationship myself with queer assimilation and kind of the desire for normalcy and normativity. Feels mixed to me. I feel like that's something that, from my perspective, my one limited queer lifetime perspective, I feel like I saw queers accept after the terrible punishment of AIDS, really. Like, I feel like, my very limited lifetime, I was born in 75. So I was just barely old enough to really see and experience and feel the kind of loud, brave queerness of like David Bowie, Freddie Mercury. Pre-AIDS queerness was so just like taking no prisoners, did not want to be normal at all, just wanted to like throw normal away and kind of like create something completely different. And then AIDS happened, and the kind of more public campaign for just basic acceptance on any level became the discourse post AIDS, because we were so hated and so just repudiated in the harshest possible terms through the 80s. And then what came out of that in the 90s was just like, can we just have basic existence and can we just be normal like you all? And would that be okay? And it felt like such a humbled version of the queer push for tearing down normal that came before. So it hurts my heart a little bit nowadays to see that there has been this kind of like assimilation into normativity on society's terms and normativity's terms, maybe louder than the push for like fuck normal, why do we need it, it comes with a lot of problems, can we do something better. And just to say that's complicated, and the queer community is so diverse and has all kinds of things going on, including people who are still beautifully living lives of resistance to normativity and thriving in that. So it's not a one-sided story, but I that's a little bit my perspective that has these moments for me being a little bit complicated. I'm like, yes, it's great. Of course, I want everybody to have access to a family and a home and all the things that they want. And yeah, I don't know. It just feels a little bit like we had to be humbled to get there to where that felt like so aspirational, and that sucks.
And I see this, and I think I see this with Alex's character, because while he's saying that he's like, I want this, I never thought I could have this, all of that, I kept wondering if a part of him felt like he needed to have all of this in order to like exist in the world and be okay. Like
Mhm.
I wondered, I had a curiosity about how much of this, especially with it, and I'm jumping way ahead, but like especially with the end and the decisions that he makes towards the end,
Oh,
it
oh,
made me very curious, all of the
mhm,
motivations, and if this was one of them. Like,
mhm,
is this really what you want? I don't know. I had a
mhm,
curiosity about
mhm.
him. And then this kind of actually is like a lightweight critique. And Wayward, we love you. We're talking about you. We
We
made
love
a
you
podcast
so
about you. We
much.
love you, Wayward, so much. But I really felt like a missing part for me was Alex's backstory. I
Mhm,
didn't get enough of that. I got little snippets about the anger piece and the violent stuff and whatever, whatever. But I desired more. And that would have helped with some of this kind of
mhm,
questioning of like, what does he really want in his
mhm,
life
mhm,
and with Laura? And where
mhm.
is that coming from? Where is that drive coming from? Because we know more, I think, about Laura's than his.
Uh-huh, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's so true. It is, I mean, it is a very, I'm curious about, right, first of all, just having a trans mask character right now in 2025 with everything that's going on in a wildly popular, I mean, the show is exploding on Netflix. Is fascinating to me and incredible and so exciting. And also like, what? I don't know. I'm perplexed by it. And so, but I guess with that, I'm also curious. Mae Martin is non-binary and chose to make this character binary transmasculine. And there are a number of references to sort of like the brotherhood, right? In the like in the police force, and he wasn't really a part of the brotherhood, but like, oh, you will be here, or you will be accepted now in that way. You're just one of the guys. There's a lot of references like that. Which I imagine were intentional. And I'm curious about the thinking behind that. And I don't know if that's just because it's more palatable right now with everything, or if it's like, okay, if we're going to have a trans character, then there has to be sort of a some kind of normativity there. But that's really interesting to me. Yeah. Yeah. And yes, there are many normative qualities about this couple. You know, they're white, they're thin. Like when Alex takes his shirt off, it's like, damn, great job, well done. And like very, very sort of Hollywood aesthetic. And you know, no scars are visible. Like everything's very sort of airbrushed, I guess it feels to me, other than the tattoos, which are sweet that those get to stay in. I liked that and there's a little splash of more alternative queerness, but yeah, it's interesting. Laura's, you know, blue eyes and very blonde and just like you said, very kind of goddessy, divine with the pregnancy. It's a there are many heteronormative aspects to their relationship while also totally being clearly a queer relationship. So it's, yeah, interesting.
Best line. Bet you never imagined the father of your kid looking like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone. Dead, dead, dead. So fucking good. Like those moments that they put in the writing that they slip in where it's like obviously themselves coming through this Alex character is just fantastic. Yeah. I really love that. You know, he talks about like, oh, she says there's still no stubble, which is interesting. Maybe she's just commenting on it like partners do when we fuck with each other's bodies and like, oh, you got more armpit hair, whatever we say. But also that the read of like the normativity piece, it's like, oh, you should you have facial hair? Is
Mhm.
that something, or is that something that he wants? And then he just says, yeah, I know, maybe I should up my dose. And again, I really love that there's no in-depth explanation of him like shooting tea and like
Mhm.
talking about it to like explaining to the audience what all that is. It's just like a normal snapshot conversation of a couple in bed talking about that. It's just a breath of fresh air to have that representation to me. But I'm saying that as a person who doesn't, you know, take tea or have top surgery, but it read real to me.
Yeah, the shirtless scene was a big deal. I made some notes on that since you brought it up. I think it was so loving and beautiful, I think, on the part of Mae Martin. And I'm so curious, Mae Martin, if you're out there and you come to love our podcast and you want to come in and talk to us, please do. We would love to pick your brain about all this, obviously. Just want to say that. Anyway, in this scene, the first shirtless scene, it was in a mirror, which I thought was so beautiful because really, like, that's, I imagine, what this whole show is for Mae Martin is putting their transness in a mirror. Which just, it felt really sweet to me that they articulated that way, with the mirror there, kind of catching them from all angles, really just like literally putting it out there. And as you said, Zoe, it was like, I'm sure there was makeup there. I'm sure that Mae Martin had the finest surgeon you can possibly have and the best regimen you can possibly find for caring for your scars and also makeup and whatnot. So it was like, obviously they're presenting a very particular version of a trans mask post top surgery chest here. But still, whoa, huge representation. That's so huge to have that on a screen, on television. And like you said, I have no idea how people are seeing this. Em and I talked about when we first started talking about this, just like wondering if some of the popularity that's going on out there is people hate watching the show. Like it does feel interesting that this is so popular in a time when trans people are being so hated in America. And if not actively hated, at least it feels like people do not have our backs right now. So it's fascinating to me also that this is as popular as it is. And I do wonder about that. I'm like, are people seeing this? And like Zoe and I talked about the other night, just not knowing that he's trans and just completely like letting that pass over their heads at all. I mean, part of my mysterious life is never really knowing how people are clocking my gender, and I don't know how people are clocking May's gender either. And so, yeah, I imagine it's a whole spectrum, but I'm so curious. I'm so curious, like what viewers are taking away who don't know trans people, because I know that's a reality in America, is that many people just don't know a trans person. So again, the representation feels huge, and I'm not sure what people are seeing when they're seeing this. And it's a big question that I have about the popularity of the show for sure.
This was a reason when we talked about doing this that felt so important to me is that in this particular like socio-cultural political moment, bringing this show in and like going into all of these places with it feels so important in terms of all of the things, the visibility, just like my own mental health and wellness, also, to be honest with you. And like, I think for a lot of people, being able to engage with a show that has this representation and is a
Mhm.
good show and
Mhm.
represents Alex's character is written in a very complex way, but it's not an archetypal trans tragedy. Like that's, I think I
Mhm.
said that earlier. Like it's not about that. I mean, there's problems that Alex gets into, but it's not about that. So it's just so important to have all of that kind of normalized in a weird Netflix show that is like dark and dreamy and has like a bizarre landscape and is Twin Peaksy, and I'm so happy for it.
Yeah.
with a Nirvana theme song. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know I'm off topic, but I was listening to the theme song and I was like singing to myself and I was like, this is familiar. And then I was singing and I was like, oh my God, this is from Nirvana Unplugged. And so I went and looked at Nirvana Unplugged and the song, Where Did You Sleep Last Night, is the Wayward song. But it popped into my head before I looked it up, which I'm trying to do more often and not just go to Google right away. I'm trying to like see if I can do it. And I did it and it made me so happy. So that's another nostalgic moment. The music in the show is fantastic. Anyway,
The
I
music of the show
digress.
is fantastic. It is
Digress.
fantastic.
Sorry,
I'm
Avery,
aware that we
continue.
have to wrap this up shortly, and there's so many things we didn't talk about. Most importantly, perhaps I want to name that we didn't talk about the brie very much at all yet. We've named that the brie is there, but I feel like in a future episode we'll have to really take that on because
Okay, we're
there's
not talking about, you're saying we're not talking
we
about.
can. I want to invite. I just want to name that we haven't talked about it yet. What do you want to say about the brie
Well,
for this episode? Because
okay,
the brie
thank you.
figures into this episode
It does.
massively
It really
and
does
massively.
massively. Okay, okay. Well, I will keep
So
it short about the brie, but the
yeah,
brie does feel extremely important.
well, let's talk about it.
Oh my goodness. Well, the first time we encounter the brie is at Abby's house,
Yeah.
and they're eating the brie. The kids are eating the brie. The girls are eating the brie, and that the dad comes in, Abby's dad, and says the brie is not cheap, and she's like, "You can have it
Uh-huh.
back," and he's like, "It's not about the brie." And then, Mom, there's brie in the fridge, and then the sister says, "Where's the brie?" And then the mom says, "We should have brought more brie, Brian." So like, there's all of this like relating to this one thing and what it represents. And then Abby's dad says that Layla, am I saying her name right? Layla?
Layla or
Lila,
Lila? We do need
Lila,
to get there.
Lila. I think it's
Lila.
Lila. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I keep my visual thing makes me say it differently. Says she's a crackhead and implies that she had something to do with her sister's death. And
Mm.
then she's in shock. And then Abby's mom comes in and gives her a huge chunk of brie. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Oh
It
Yeah.
yeah.
wasn't a little piece of brie. That
No.
was
No.
like, half of one of those big old wheels of brie.
Mhm.
That's going to take you a little bit of time to eat that brie. And so, and then later at Abby's house, when the white people, the rich white people come in, who maybe is associated with Abby's dad, they make fun of her outfit and call her a flower child. And then they are also talking about the creamy brie. So like for me, I read into an association of like wealth and resources and status. And then parents talking about it. So it's like somehow in the realm of like adults being able to give it or take it away. So I think about it and I'm going there psychodynamically in terms of like milk, that you can
Uh-huh.
have it, you
For
can
sure.
have this thing that brings you satiation, or you're gonna, I withdraw it and you can't have that. And so, and it comes back later, but I just feel like that's a that's a part of, for me, it almost links back to the mother wound around, what you can have. And when they first get into the house, Tony Collette leaves them a basket of goodies. And there's cheese in there, and I don't know if it's brie, but there's definitely eggs in there. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This couldn't be more. Like, here's an egg, like,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of stuff around that for me about like milk, eggs, all of those kinds of iconography things. But what do y'all think about the brie?
I mean, similar for me immediately. It's wealth, it's money, it's luxury, it's indulgence, right? Like brie is this rich, creamy, decadent cheese that is sort of fancier and it's richness, it's creaminess. So yes, the I love that you went there with the breast milk. The only thing I'll add, I think everything you said is right on. The only thing I'll add is just I think especially when Abby's mom brings Lila this big chunk of cheese after she knows that Lila has just heard the father insinuate that she had something to do with her sister's death. And like you said, she's just stunned and kind of can't believe what she's hearing. And the mom brings this over and hands it to her and then gives her a hug. And it felt to me like that was a representation of the way that often very, this is a generalization, but I find there is a theme here, or a tendency of very well off families using money in lieu of emotional attunement and care. And it felt like such an explicit moment of that, of like, oh my God, this horrifying thing is just said and alluded to. And yeah, she gives her a hug and she at least follows her and like acknowledges it in some way, but it's so lacking and it's so not enough for that moment. And then she hands her this chunk of brie. It's almost like I'm gonna pay you to just kind of have you go away and not make a scene, and that's all I have to offer, right? Like I don't really know what else to do. This is so awkward. This is so painful. The grief is too much. So let me just sort of put something in your mouth and shut you up. Um, so that was what I thought about that moment.
Similar. I won't add too much. Yeah, luxury status. I mean, I will say I noticed in that conversation where where Abby's parents are sitting with the white couple and talking right after this really really terrible moment and awkward moment where Abby kind of tells tells them off and says like, "What did you expect when you had kids?" and then leaves. The mother tries to kind of like smooth out that moment by asking them how their kids are. And they respond like, "How are your two?" is the question she asked, and they respond, "Wonderful." And then it's just a list of status things like, "This one's at this school, this one's at this school." That's literally all they say about their own children, is like what school they're going to. So again, this kind of theme of like what it looks like to not be a troubled teen is just status, achievement, status, achievement, status, achievement, which I think, Abby's really striving to just be a person, not a list of status achievements. And it's so controversial in her home that's what she's going for. And yeah, it becomes highly controversial in some families for a teenager to not be just on that track of particular status symbols. So the brie here, I think for sure is a status symbol. I'll say too about the brie as we go along and the air around the brie, it does remind me of this Buffy episode. And I do think Mae Martin was a Buffy person. So I'm so curious, again, Mae, if you want to talk to us, would love it. But so curious if May had that in mind, because there is this episode of Buffy where all of the main characters are sitting together on a couch and then pass out together and are dreaming, and they all dream about something really significant, which I won't say or waste time with explaining, but there's something really significant that they all dream in common. But then there's also this weird dude with cheese that they all dream about in common. And he's just literally presenting a plate of cheese in different scenarios to each of them. And so the surrealism of it feels like a little touch of that. Like there is meaning in it, but there's also this kind of surreal air around the brie as it comes up in a few different times that felt to me like a nod at surrealism in general, and maybe particularly a nod to that moment in Buffy where there's this guy with cheese always kind of showing up. But I don't know. Yes. The only thing I'll add on the kind of good breast and the milk of it all is just that cheese is rotten, like it's like it is rotten milk. So there's something here, I think, in that like they've created this really fancy rotten milk that is brie. And maybe Evelyn has created kind of a fancy, very cultivated rotten milk in her complex. But the facts are the facts. Cheese is rotted, and something here, perhaps in the Pines, is also rotted. Um,
I mean, I just feel like fancy rotten milk is like the name of our episode. Like it's so perfectly
Fancy
encompasses
rotten milk. Yeah,
all of what
all of
we've been
it.
talking about. Yeah. And it's absolutely hilarious. And it's just so right on, Avery. This is so
Love
great.
it.
Oh my God, this was so fun. This was
Yay.
so much fun. I
So
really, really
fun.
appreciate us being able to do it, and Zoe for all of your incredible insights and contributions, and just like all and your beautiful psychological mind and spirit that you bring to the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, it was so fun. I really enjoyed myself as well, and just feels like a nice free associating space about such a fabulous show. What an exciting, I love that you're doing this podcast. It's a great, great topic, and there's so much to dive into. I can't wait to hear the rest of what you have to say, and also the other guests that will come and weigh in as well.
Thanks so much, both of you, for talking it out today. That was just delightful. We'll do this again soon, Em.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll cover episode 2 and have another guest. And please, if you're listening, follow us on all the things, write us a review, give us 5 stars.
That's right.
let Mae Martin know that we exist
Definitely
and
reach
that
out
they
to me,
should come
Martin.
talk to us. And we will see you in the pines. Thanks a lot,
See
everybody.
you in the pines.